These are the times that Steph Curry absolutely humiliated players who tried to trash talk him. Now, when we start talking about trash talk, there's just no way we could go through this entire video without bringing up Patrick Beverley. This is a moment that's come around a lot in recent memory, but Beverley openly told Steph this: "You had the last 5 years, the next 5 years are mine." Now, this was in response to Curry and the Golden State Warriors dominating everybody they came up against for a stretch of time. And this statement didn't necessarily result in Steph openly trash-talking him back, but man, did he let his play on the court do the talking. Steph continued to wreak havoc with the Warriors for the next 5 years and then some. Meanwhile, Beverley saw himself included in a whole bunch of trade packages, and he's never really been known as a starting point guard in the league. Really, Steph didn't even need to say anything here. He just embarrassed him with his own play on the court. Now, that's cold. But this next humiliating moment was even colder. See, it's become a trend lately for young players to step onto the court against the most feared ball players from the previous generation. And what makes this worse is they usually can't back it up. They just can't fathom that they're sharing a court with some of their idols. And this often backfires on them. Just ask Kevin Porter, the Houston Rockets young guard who tried to go after Steph. It happened during a timeout when Steph was just waiting for the team to resume play while setting up an inbounds pass, catching his breath at the same time. As he stood there patiently waiting with his hands on his knees, Porter took notice. The youngster began following him to his spot while staring him down without blinking for a few seconds, and he kind of began copying Steph's stance. Obviously, Steph didn't blink or budge when this was happening, but there's no way he didn't take notice of what was going on, and he wanted to show the young guard where he stood in this league. Curry went into that fourth quarter like a dude possessed, scoring 21 points in the quarter and bringing his total up to 40 points on the night to help the Warriors come out of that road matchup with another win under their belt.
Who does it again?
And when asked about what Porter was doing after the game, Curry said, "It's not the first time and it won't be the last time. I started bringing it to another level. You always have to, but you definitely bring another level of competitiveness when you have fun stuff like that happen. I take it all as entertainment, but sometimes you need a little boost." Honestly, I don't think there's much doubt that if Porter hadn't done that, Houston might have been able to get a win that game. And of course, that's not the only time the Rockets accidentally poked the bear in recent memory. When Houston was taking on the Warriors in the Western Conference semifinals, point guard Chris Paul wanted to be as petty as possible with Steph. The Warriors were already winning the series 3-2 coming into Game 6, and the matchup was going to be played at the Rockets Arena. Now, throughout the entire series to this point, the Rockets hung around much in thanks to a poor shooting performance from Steph. He just wasn't hitting the shots we're used to seeing him hit, and the Rockets obviously benefited tremendously. Then, before this pivotal Game 6, Steph talked with the Warriors trainers and got a reservation in the gym to work on his shot. The reservation was supposed to last for about an hour, just in an effort to wake him up and help send Houston home. Well, Paul found out about that reservation, and CP3 decided to head down to the gym at the exact same time and start to put some shots up. Now, Curry figured it was just an inconvenience at the time, and he offered to split the court in half with Paul so they could both get some work in, but Paul didn't want to let that slide. He literally kicked Steph out of the gym to prevent him from warming up. And I think you're all kind of starting to get a feeling of where this story is headed. Yeah, Steph lit up the Rockets in Game 6 and eliminated them from the postseason completely. He looked more motivated than ever, and he was firing off a whole bunch of shots late in the second half to make sure there'd be no Game 7. Now, some of you might be wondering if it was all just a coincidence, if Steph's performance in Game 6 was simply him finding his shooting groove eventually, rather than him being motivated by Paul in particular. But then came the antics when the game ended. Steph was caught on camera yelling out to Draymond Green, "Kick me off the court again, boy." There's just no question that this was directed right at Paul for booting him from the gym earlier before this game. But then Draymond began shouting back, "Kick him off, kick him off." Now, we could go on and on about what Steph and the Warriors were shouting about regarding CP3 and the Rockets after that series win, but we'll move on to the next player who was humiliated by Steph instead, and that next player is actually Kendrick Perkins. Well, former player, I guess. Perkins was signed by the Cleveland Cavs before a postseason run in order to help some of the younger guys through the playoffs. It was just another veteran leader in the locker room, though it turned out to be much more than that during the NBA Finals. The Warriors were already winning the series 1-0 and had a double-digit lead at the end of the fourth quarter in Game 2. Steph heaved up a deep shot while stumbling out of bounds, and he accidentally stepped on or near Perkins' foot, who was sitting on the bench in a suit. Now, instead of just simply walking away, Steph got into it with Perkins, who rose to his feet immediately to begin trash-talking the Warriors superstar. So already when you think about this situation, it's not a good look. Perkins is on a team that's in the NBA Finals and he's just sitting there on the bench. He's not even in uniform either. The guy's simply just sitting there as a DNP in a full suit cheering his squad on. Meanwhile, Steph was leading a finals charge that resulted in not one but 2 rings since that moment. And on top of that, the Warriors went on to finish that particular finals series by winning 4 out of the 5 games they played. Perkins didn't suit up in any of those games, so I don't think we need to say any more about why this one was embarrassing for Kendrick. And that takes us into our next moment, though, which involves the exciting Anthony Edwards. Now, we all know how confident and talented the young Ant-Man is already, but sometimes that confidence gets him into some trouble. In this particular matchup with the Warriors, Edwards and his Minnesota Timberwolves were giving Golden State all they had. And at one point, Edwards started lighting up the scoreboard and was going into a timeout with 40 points. That's when he did something a little bit foolish. See, Steph was just casually walking past him, but Edwards looked over at him and said, "Steph, I might go for 50. Steph didn't look like he even heard that at first, but eventually he turned around and shared a few words with the youngster before doing this.
Beverley's got 5 fouls. Steph gets some separation. It's a deep 2 from the line.
Edwards might have had the better game, but it didn't matter in the end. Steph was able to take over the final few minutes of that game and actually find a way to hit the 2 game-winning free throws with Edwards just standing there watching him helpless. Sure, Edwards had a night to remember that night, but Steph got the last laugh. Now, speaking of a night to remember, that's exactly what Luka Doncic had when he attempted to get into Steph's head. Mind you, this particular situation happened during Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, a series that was completely dominated by the Warriors due to their experience and overall talent. Still, that didn't stop Luka from trying to get a head start in this series by making a quick joke. It was right in the middle of the game when Steph missed his first free throw attempt. And if you watch Steph play a lot, that's something that rarely ever happens. Anyway, Doncic then yelled over, "Dang, what's going on, man? You scared?" This next part is harder to make out, but there may have been a few people who claim Steph looked back over to Luka and said, "Hey Luka, can you shut up?" From that point on, the Warriors turned it up a notch. Golden State quickly took care of the Dallas Mavericks throughout that series, and Steph went on to play in the NBA Finals, winning it all for his 4th NBA championship. Luka was probably sitting on his couch thinking about what he said at the free throw line that night, as Steph was hoisting another trophy. And as we've already shown you a lot in this video, Steph does a great job of letting his play do the talking for him, and when you're that talented, it seems pretty easy. And that reminds me of the time that he did this to Russell Westbrook. Now, the two of them had been stewing for a few years at this point. Curry openly said that he would have preferred to see James Harden win the MVP over Russ due to team success, and Westbrook responded by saying, "I don't care, who's he?"
I don't care, no matter what he said. Who is he?
That was only the start, though. When these teams met up in the playoffs and the Thunder got a 3-2 series lead, Curry shut down all that Westbrook had to say. Russ at one point said that Curry's defense was overrated and he wasn't scared of facing off against it at all. How do we know he felt that way? Well, a reporter brought up Curry's defense to Westbrook in a post-game interview, and Westbrook just looked down and held in a laugh.
Do you think that he's underrated as a defender?
The guy really just openly laughed at Curry. Well, Steph and the Warriors forced a Game 7 shortly after that, thanks to Steph hitting a big-time bucket with 10 seconds left, and then stealing an inbounds pass that was thrown by Westbrook to seal the deal. This next one was one of the most obvious humiliating moments because Steph made sure to point out exactly who he was going after. Jaylen Brown was just a rookie at this time and competing against Steph, and with the game being pretty close towards the end of the third quarter, Steph absolutely cooked Brown in the final possession to give his team a lead going into the 4th frame. That wasn't all though, as Steph turned around after sinking the 3-ball and pointed directly at Brown. Jaylen just tried to ignore it and walk away because he had nothing left to say, which is kind of surprising because that's the exact reason why Steph was so fired up. Curry pointed at him while sharing some likely unpleasant words, and then he used his hands to motion that Brown had been talking too much throughout the game. I can guarantee you Brown had nothing to say after that play. So yeah, I want to say that all these players learned their lesson to never try and trash talk Steph, but come on, it's all part of the game, and we really all live for these trash talking moments. Just like when trash talking Luka goes horribly wrong. So click now to watch that.